to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is efficiency is not the only metric. So we're in a culture that values efficiency oftentimes above all else. And there are deep consequences to such a limited one-dimensional view, and we're going to have a conversation about that today. So it should be an interesting little interlude. But before we get started, let's just take a minute or two to get present. Let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine brilliant bright light lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, and energizing all your cells, your molecules, your electrons, creating a brilliant beam of light and energy from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale, exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine invigorating all your cells, all your organs, all your body and energy. And as you exhale, exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's press our palms together. Vigorously rub your hands together to feel the friction, the temperature, the pressure, the motion, the tickling and tingling when you stop. And allow all those sensations to bring you present right here, right now, into this remarkable physical form that enables us to experience life. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So today we're talking about efficiency, and one of the rallying cries of our culture is to be making things more efficient. And the thing about that rallying cry, it's not that there's anything wrong with efficiency, but good morning, Rosalind. Welcome. So good to have you here with us this morning. It's not that there's anything wrong with efficiency. It's just that efficiency needs to occur within the context of a greater dynamic system. And oftentimes what happens with efficiency is that we get very narrowly focused on one task, for instance, and accomplishing that task at the expense of anything else that might be impacted. And this arose because I was having a conversation with somebody who is going to be helping me move out a bunch of stuff that I'm giving away or that I'm getting rid of. And this person was just talking about, well, it's all about efficiency and you need to do this, and this. And, I said, listen, this is an emotional experience for me, and that needs to be considered. No, efficiency, it's all about efficiency. And it really brought very much to heart and mind the drive for efficiency that does not take into consideration a system view of all the factors that need to be considered when designing an approach to problem solving or to getting something done. And an example of this is the way that war is strategized, where it might be more efficient to lose 500 lives than to take another course of action that would preserve life and accomplish the objective. When we look at the way our governments are allocate funds and good morning, Shosha, welcome. So good to have you here with us this morning. Doge, right? Efficiency. And look at what has happened as a result of that. In fact, it's the activities haven't particularly been efficient. What they would come in and they'd blow things up and make a mess that needed lots and lots of correction afterward. And so the correction, in the meantime, they've destroyed people's lives and had to all kinds of mass firings and then rehirings and creating this chaos that has a greater impact ostensibly in the name of efficiency. And I think we get to look at how we evaluate effectiveness. I think efficiency and effectiveness are not necessarily synonyms. That efficiency, true efficiency, is going to take into consideration the workings, the dynamic workings of a system. And I think that this points to something else that can become very problematic for us, in that when we become focused on one aspect of something, our vision tends to block out the other elements. And if we're evaluating something based on just that pinpoint of vision, we can end up creating all kinds of havoc that are unintended consequences. And those consequences result purely from lack of perspective, literally the broader vision. So I wonder, when, like, if we look at assembly lines, for example, the idea there is to create efficiency, right? But what happens is people are doing repetitive things over and over and over and over, and it's creating repetitive stress injury. And the organization that has developed the metrics for the efficiency may be like, okay, well, that's a price to pay. But look at the human cost of it. When we look at the way this is a really interesting one to me anyway. There's a new grocery store, a new giant grocery store that recently opened right near me. And it's a beautiful store, but the traffic pattern for pedestrians especially, but also for vehicles to get to the grocery store, and the placement of the entrance of the grocery store and the placement of the parking spaces, it's an incredible example of really, really poor design, or paper design, without looking at the mechanics of the system that this thing was placed into, and how the surrounding area interacts with this space. I imagine somebody sat down with a plot of the land and they place things to be most efficient on paper, but it has no relationship to how people can interact with the space. It's just a horrific design. The inside of the store is lovely, but the outside and the access and the parking lot is ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous, where pedestrians don't really have access, where the traffic pattern to drive into the store takes you from the back of the store, and the parking is at a great distance from the entryway, and it's just clearly an example of somebody who had tunnel vision in the design of this location without considering the broader picture. And I think that this is something that so many of us can become at the effect of, because we get tunnel vision. We get so focused on trying to accomplish the thing we're trying to accomplish that we don't see the bigger picture. So it was interesting in this situation with folks helping to facilitate this move, where they were saying, well, my strategy, I think you did it the wrong way. My strategy would have been this, that, or the other thing. And I said, well, my strategy is to do this in such a way that I can preserve the livability of this environment as long as possible. And that's why I took the approach that I took. So, in the name of efficiency, the definition that they were holding of efficiency didn't account for the bigger picture of actually living in the environment for weeks. So Shosha says paper plans versus real life in sustainable community. Yes, yes, yes. Well, so this gets into another conversation, which is a really, really good one. And it's the problem with problem solving, where people will look at, okay, we have this plot of land. We want to have a a grocery store that has this many square feet and that has this particular configuration. And now we have to fit a parking lot around that without considering the bigger picture. So where in our lives are we not considering the bigger picture? Like where we're moving ahead at a rocket rate, rocketing forward without considering all the other elements and the consequences to make our efforts truly workable. And maybe we get to broaden our notion of what efficiency is. Maybe we get to slow down and look at the bigger picture before we go trying to intervene with something. So the problem with problem solving is that the solutions to the problem that we come up with are defined by the way we're defining the problem. So oftentimes the way we define the problem is, again, very narrowly focused. It's not taking into account the other elements at play. It's not taking into account the greater systems that are impacted by whatever those solutions are. So this is one of my favorite of all examples because it's on such a monumental scale, where there is recognition that there's a shortage of power, energy, electricity. And the idea was, how do we generate more power? And then there was this brilliant, and I'm saying that sarcastically, idea. I mean, on the surface, it may have seemed brilliant to just put solar panels all over the Saharan desert, and that could power all of Europe and continents, and ostensibly looks like good decision. It's already a desert, right? Well, through some modeling, some artificial intelligence and machine intelligence modeling, thankfully they were able to discover that if they were to do that, what would have happened is it would have destroyed the rainforest. And that seems wildly bizarre, right? Why would putting solar panels on the Saharan desert destroy the rainforest? But what they didn't notice at first when they were conceptualizing this, because they were focused on creating more energy, was this larger system where the wind currents blow tons of sand from the Sahara to the rainforest, and that provides all kinds of nutrition to the forest through the minerals, I guess. But I mean, crazy. Who would have thunk it, right? Who would have imagined that the Saharan desert was essential to the survival of the rainforest? But had someone not taken it upon themselves to do this modeling, we would have burned down one of the greatest lungs of the planet. And so the solution wasn't looking at the greater system. So there's I guess I'll call it a discipline called regenerative design. Regeneration is a big buzzword these days, sort of taken the place of sustainability, but it applies in all different areas. And one of the foundational premises or precepts, I think, of regenerative design is the concept of nested holes. And that means systems within systems within systems, and looking at different levels of impact. So when we're looking at this notion of the solar panels, for example, on the Saharan desert, one system to look at is the Saharan desert, right? And then as we get into broader, then maybe Europe is becoming part of it. And then we get to look at the planet as a greater system where we could recognize that the desert isn't just an empty space that doesn't have an interrelationship with other systems on the planet. So one thing affects a bigger thing, affects a bigger thing. And we can see that, for instance, in our own lives, and then in the life of our social structure, like maybe even our immediate community, and then in context of the life of our state, in context of the life of our country, in context of the life of the world. For example, this is what we're talking about, nested systems. And we can see this right now, for instance, as we look at our politics, right? We can see that what's going on in our federal government and how that's impacting smaller systems, but it's also impacting world relationships. So these nested systems, we haven't necessarily looked at the consequences of certain policies. So getting back to efficiency, like these ideas of, well, we're going to make these functions more efficient. And then what's the consequence? So, for instance, if we replace human work with robotics, great. The plant is a whole lot more efficient. There's no more downtime. There's no much less expense for workforce. And then great. So that one little microcosm may be more efficient. However, what is the impact on the community? And how is that affecting the local livelihood? And then if that community dies, how is that affecting the greater community, like maybe the state? And if that community dies, what kind of impact is it having on the greater economy? Another way to look at this is companies that pollute and that create things. Actually, there's some states, I just heard that there are several states who have mandated legally that companies are now to be responsible for end of life of the products that they create. So these companies that are creating things from plastics that are going to last for hundreds and hundreds of years are responsible now for what happens to those materials rather than putting it off to the public. So it's up until these kinds of mandates get enforced, actually, what happens is that companies may find it more efficient for them to create solutions that cause all kinds of pollution. And it's more efficient for them to do that, more cost effective for them to do that than to make the investment in doing things in a way that has a consideration for the greater population, right? And they've gotten away with that for a very long time, where the companies have license to create all kinds of pollution, create all kinds of social disruption through health threats and resource threats and materials that are non-destructible at this point, that just pollute our environment. And they have done that in the name of efficiency. You know, maybe the designed obsolescence, for instance, is a part of their survival for their company, because if they know that things are going to break, then they need to be replaced more frequently, which means more business for them. Well, what's the consequence in the greater picture? The consequence is that we have more junk, that we have more trash that has to be contended with, and they have no accountability for those things. So these are the kinds of choices that have been driven by the notion of efficiency and profit also, right? Because efficiency is tied in so many ways to money and profitability. And the more efficient we can be, the more profitable we can be as a company, typically. But that efficiency has been a very narrow metric that has allowed for dismissing consequence. So although it may be, although it is counter to our cultural bias, doing things faster, doing things more, in big air quotes, efficiently, might be, again, sarcastically here, might be something that we want to revisit and reevaluate, that we might just want to be looking, slowing down and looking more broadly to recognize the impact, the broader impact of our actions. So getting back, circling back to this whole move thing, this person coming into my space and kind of knocking me out of the way in the name of helping me, right? Or just sort of steamrolling over me to accomplish this efficiency in moving things out of the environment. You can see where that's a very human consequence, and is also something that will profoundly impact my relationship with that person, right? That that maintaining connection. So this is the punchline for this conversation, is efficiency without connection is violence. And so let's look at how we conduct ourselves and note that perhaps relationship with ourselves, with each other, with our environment, with our broader dynamic is what breeds health. So Shosha says, from toxic lawn care, forever baby diapers, gas if pig farms, the negative consequences are obvious and rampant. 100% Shosha, 100%. And so there are evils attendant to efficiency in the way that we have implemented it culturally, and our acceptance of that kind of metric as valued. So question, that's where it comes to, and be in relationship. That's what we get to challenge ourselves to do, to be in relationship to ourselves, even when we're trying to accomplish something, and not just drive without being in relationship to ourselves and the cost to ourselves. So that's it for today. I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection, and I go live here each weekday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page and YouTube channel. And I invite you to please like, follow, and share Enlightened World Network and me. The links are in the description. And as always, I so appreciate you and the opportunity to muse together about what it is to be human.